Greetings, brothers and sisters. So I had a, a brief meditation this morning, and this information came into my system. One of the ways the heartfulness meditation makes my videos better. And this is something I haven't thought about or talked about, and I don't think anybody else has. And it is how that the religion of science, they talk about science now, and science has overtaken the religious authority. And we saw this in, the past year. I mean, it happened a while ago, but it's something where it was fully acknowledged and out there. The religion of science had taken over in America for the religion of Christianity, but on a global basis for any religion that's there, right? Probably less so in India and some other countries, but it's still there, the religion of science. And what happened was when COVID struck, when we had the COVID, panic, the media came out and the government to some extent and said, don't go to churches. Don't go to any sort of religious, and, for me it was the heartfulness meditation. You couldn't go to any kind of religious service. You couldn't group up, right? They made it illegal. And, this was unconstitutional as well. There's a lot of unconstitutional things that have happened. So this took over the religion of the Constitution, the religion of the, the governmental overlords, right? This was something that now science was ruling over all these things. Science was the authority. Because before, it was the religions would say, all right, this is what we feel about this. And then that was what would dominate. That was the religious authority. But what we had happen was something of a fearful-based crisis nature happened. And they said, don't go to your church to worship your imaginary God, because the religion of science says that that's a bad thing. And so we're not counting on your religion or your God to cure you of this disease, this COVID disease, which probably is a man-made thing, right, in itself. So you had science create something to where science was then going to solve the problem. It's the ultimate in problem reaction solution. They create a problem, then the people have a reaction, and then the controlling system gives you the solution. And they created the problem so that they could implement the solution. And so we had this thing that happened where the religion of science took over from the religion of, from godly religion. And neither godly religion or science religion are good things. In their pure state, the worship or the belief in God or the belief in science are good. Science as a pure thing is fine. Science is, wonderful, just like having a spiritual relationship with God is wonderful. But when it becomes a religion, religion is the problem. And the reason religion is the problem is this word obscurantism.
Obscurantism.
Obscurantism or obscurantism, I like obscurantism, is a word I heard in the Whispers of the Brighter World messages, these, channeled messages that I've talked about in the past. There's a link in the description box. I think I put it in there permanently for people who want access to these things. You just have to give your email address, and they put out one a day. And this French woman was getting messages mostly from Babaji, the second master of the heartfulness system, but she got messages from all these higher developed spiritual beings, some of them brilliant, and most of them are about spirituality and a relationship with God. I mean, there's thousands of them, like 20,000 of them. I mean, there's a vast amount, more than any work of this kind. And I recognized this word obscurantism last year, and I'd heard it and I never bothered to look it up. But it is the validation for what we do here in the truth community. The reason the truth community exists is because of obscurantism. The practice of deliberately preventing the facts or full details or something from becoming known. And it usually has to do with power, but it can be with anybody, right? Of course, it could be low-level power, like your parents lying to you about Santa Claus. That would be obscurantism. Your parents and the system telling you that Santa delivers presents to you is obscurantism, because that's not what happens, right? It is, the practice of deliberately preventing the facts or full details or something from becoming known. And so this is something that's mentioned quite often in the heartfulness system, that obscurantism has to go. That the leaders, the people that lead our system, but on any level, and on any level, that obscurantism has to stop. And this is why we exist. This is why this channel is a part of, what we call the truth community, because they lie to us, right? They deliberately prevent the facts. You hear disinformation all the time. Now CNN talks about disinformation. Of course, disinformation is a word used in the government, and you have these disinformation organizations, CIA, MI6, Mossad, right? These, every government has a disinformation part of their program. They have spy, they have some sort of intelligence community, and then they have disinformation networks. Then you have advertisement. Which is disinformation. So if you add obscurantism to science, or if you add obscurantism to godly practice, which is religion, the religion brings obscurantism. Because what religion does, whether it's the religion of science or it's the religion of God, it takes something that's pure, God is pure, and science can be pure, scientific discovery, and it brings in a controlling group of people who are going to warp the teachings, warp science, warp the practice of connecting with God, and they are going to use it for their own benefit. And so I'm going to get into some of the obscurantism in religion, particularly the dominant American religion, but you can say this about all religions, and I've talked about this before in some of my older videos, but let's start off with obscurantism with the religion of science, because we can see now, instead of using religious authority, when people used to say, all right, this is what your religion says, this is why you have to do this, they're now saying, this is why you have to do this, shut up and wear your mask, it's science, right?
It's science, and you shut up and wear your mask. It's science, and you shut up and wear your mask. It's science, and you shut up and wear your mask.
This is why you have to do this, because it's science. It's the religion of science. But it's not the true religion of science because of this, the practice of deliberately preventing the facts or full details of something from becoming known. So the first part of this is science helped us discover oil. In fact, there would be no oil without science, right? Science said, all right, there's this layer of oil that exists below the earth. And what science didn't figure out is, why is it there? And if we take it, what might happen to us? So if you had true science, you would say, all right, there's oil here, right? This is crude oil, which exists underneath the earth for some reason, right? You see that there's layers to the earth. See what happens on the top layer where you have topsoil, and that's where we grow all our food. You have like grasses that turn into, you see like in the winter, the grass turns into turf, right? When you get turf, there's dead grass and things in there, and it slowly builds topsoil. And that's what happens on the plains. Also, you have mountain erosion, things, particles, sand, and whatever it might be, coming off the mountains from rain and wind into small particles. And that rolls down the mountain in streams and water, and that layers off on the plateaus, which creates topsoil. So if you go in the middle part of the country, what the middle states of the country that are between mountains, because you have mountains on the east coast and you have mountains on the west coast, and then you have this erosion that happens, and then you have these flat plain states, Iowa being one of the big ones, right? Kansas and Indiana and some of these states that don't have any sort of mountainous areas have great topsoil for this reason. Plus you have great topsoil because of mountain erosion. And then you have stuff like leaves and things that decay, right? Dead bodies of animals and things that have lots of nutrients in them. And that all goes on the top layer. And it makes it easy for trees to get nutrition. And then there's deeper layers of subsoil and things like this, right? You have bedrock and all these things. If you ever watch like the Gold Rush show, where they're digging through these layers to get to the gold-rich bedrock, right? And there's these various layers, and then underneath there's oil. And so then science discovered the combustion engine. This is, stuff that came out of science, right? Where they used to have steam engines at first, but then they realized that there was these explosions they could create by processing oil into a combustible, which is gasoline. And that would explode with a spark from a spark plug, and then that would generate some movement, right? The explosion would generate some movement, and it was powerful enough to make cars, and so they started to create these vehicles, various types of vehicles. Of course, there's the propulsion engines and jet engines as well that's a part of this. And so now we could drive across the country and fly. And so these were things that were given to us by science, right? But there's a couple of problems with this, right? The oil was here for a reason. Like, God didn't say, all right, go take all this oil. Like, we didn't have religious or godly permission to take this oil. And scientists didn't figure out what would happen to planet Earth if we took this oil and we brought it up to the surface, right? And we used it in combustion engines. Like, would that cause a problem with planet Earth in these various layers? Because it might, like, we don't know what taking the oil out of the planet, there's various Aboriginal cultures that believe that this is a bad thing. This is, the Earth's blood or whatever they want to call it, and that it's there for a reason, and it isn't supposed to be harvested the way we've harvested it. So that's, one thing, that science, again, obscurantism, where you have people, because obscurantism, the way I'm going to talk about here, is like, don't worry about it, there's no problem. There's a lot of that in science, right? Where the people, the money people that employ the scientists, the people who are in governments, the people who are in finance, the people who pay the scientific bills, the people who make or break the scientists, who give them money for their funding, have influence over scientific discoveries. And so one of the things that science now is saying is, we told you to drive these cars. We discovered oil. We discovered a way to process it into gas. And we had you guys drive these cars, which led to cities, right? Because now people weren't living out in rural areas and village-based areas. Electricity, and I'll get into that, the discovery of electricity also, which is doing damage, which science should know, right? So science can make a discovery of something, an invention, something that can make life easier, the discovery of something that can create tools or create, machines and things like they have with gasoline. But also they have to look into what's going to be the effect, what's the environmental impact, well, how is that going to affect everything? And we have CO2 emissions, which now science says is going to depopulate the planet and create global warming. But they're the ones who created it. They're the ones who gave us gasoline. Science, the religion of science created this. And then you had all these money people that said, oh, don't worry about it. Don't do environmental impact studies. Don't look into the effects of taking oil from the ground, underneath the ground. Because we've now told all these people to drive cars. Our whole system is based in fossil fuels because we have a petrodollar. Like even our economic system, our debt-based economic system is relying on the petrodollar. The petrodollar is that you have to buy gasoline, you have to buy fuel through converting your currency into American dollars. It's why America retains some dominance in the world. But now we have this thing called carbon dioxide poisoning and carbon monoxide poisoning. And these are things from fossil fuels and things like this, that if you breathe in carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide, CO2, what's going to happen? Well, you could die, right? Or just have a negative effect on your body. So what they've taken is oil out of the ground and converted it into gasoline and things like plastics, which is a big problem. We have plastics all over the place not breaking up and creating environmental hazards, killing turtles, and the rest of it. And we have carbon dioxide toxicity. So we've added a poison into our atmosphere. We've added something that we're going to breathe. So I am doing the editing process, and I want to do a better job of explaining this because this falls upon science. This is science's responsibility here. And it says the role of the respiratory system is to breathe in oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide. This is known as respiration. The cells of the body use oxygen to perform functions that keep us alive. The waste product created by the cells, once they have performed these functions, is carbon dioxide. Of course, this is, why you would think that wearing a mask, you're going to rebreathe some of this carbon dioxide. There's no way you're not, right? That you're breathing something out and it's going to stay there, some of it, at least. And then it says the air in the Earth's atmosphere is made up approximately of 70% nitrogen and 21% oxygen. So when you live in the mountains, I lived in the mountains before in New Mexico and then in Utah as well. And then you walk up to these mountains and you get up to a place where there's no tree line. It's above the tree line, which I believe is at 9,000 feet. And you're walking and you're out of breath and maybe even get a headache. When they go up to Mount Everest, they have to have oxygen tanks and things like this because the air is thinner. And then you go to places that are very dense in oxygen and you feel light. You can go to oxygen bars and things like this and get, go to a place where there's more oxygen in the air. But for the most part, 21% of oxygen is good, right? If you have that amount of oxygen in the air, you're doing pretty well. And then there's other gases too here. It says carbon dioxide, neon, and hydrogen. So we have all these things that we breathe in. And they're in a recipe, like you mix something, right? You mix up a recipe of something, and the right ratios, 70% nitrogen and 21% oxygen. But when you have something like, auto emissions, and this is the big thing they say about CO2 gases, carbon dioxide, CO2 is carbon dioxide, then you mess up that ratio, right? If you have all these cars around the planet putting out what's poisonous, and at the same time you're cutting down trees that breathe in carbon dioxide and breathe out oxygen, which is nice of them, right? And so if you get rid of all the trees and you produce more carbon dioxide through vehicles, there's going to be an imbalance. And so there's a real thing to the carbon dioxide. There's so much in the truth community they say, well, CO2, all this stuff is BS. Well, it's not BS. The way that they're using it is BS. But this was a problem caused by science. This is what science has done. They've created this. And then they come out and say, well, trust us. Well, why should we trust you? Because you're the ones that gave us automobiles. You're the ones that figured out we could process fossil fuels. You're the ones that, put them into cars, built cars and the combustion engine, learn how to do all these things, extract oil from the earth, turn it into gas, and make us all dependent on it. And now you want to say it's a problem? Like, why didn't you, consider this before you did any of this? Like, why did you wait till we're all, our whole system is predicated on having oil and gasoline to be the basis of our transportation systems and our economy, right? Our economic system. And then they were like blaming it on us, right? Not the corporations, not the scientists, not the money people, not, the people that set this stuff up and set it into motion. Not the, advertisement that was out there. Oh, you got to have a car, right? You're not a man if you don't have a car, right? Like, this is how they've pushed it in movies and TV shows and all these things. They wanted this, and they've introduced something that's toxic to us. It's something we get rid of, our body expels in CO2, and they've said, all right, let's, put all this CO2 into the atmosphere. What'll happen? Oh, and then, now they're coming back around and saying, hey, you guys got to stop doing the CO2 thing. Like, it's our fault, And so, I thought I should add this, and let's get back to our regularly scheduled programming. So if you, go in your garage and you start up your car, and you're stupid and you close the door, and then you start doing some work, you're going to die, right? Like, you're going to not have oxygen. And so now we've added, because of the amount of pollution. So you have this is a great example. The city of Denver is built in a bowl, right? You have all this pollution that sits there because it's surrounded by mountain ranges, and it just settles down It's almost like a valley, even though it's a mile high itself. It's a valley amongst other higher mountains around it. And there's these various places in the West, you'll see this, where air pollution just settles in. And people are breathing this in. It's not, directly killing them, but it definitely has a negative effect on your health, right? So if you're a person who says, all right, I don't want to wear a mask because I'm breathing out, my body is expelling carbon dioxide. Trees are expelling oxygen, and they actually absorb carbon dioxide, CO2. And so we have an imbalance now, according to scientists, that there are CO2 problems because they, discovered oil, scientists, and then they said, all right, everyone drive cars, and business people came in and said, all right, let's, create a mass manufacturing, again, based in science, all these automated manufacturing things. Let's create massive manufacturing, and let's, get all this oil out of the ground and burn it up and pollute, right? They're the ones who created this. Scientists, the religions of science created what they're now saying is leading to this, right? And they're saying, oh, now we got to do different things. We're going to have to get rid of you driving your cars and all these things. But we also have to ship food all around to these cities because science has made it that people can live in cities. And they're leaving all this footprint of pollution because people are more unnatural now and the cities are unnatural. And now we have all this, other things that are created by science that are killing us, that are, leading to bad things, GMO foods, processed foods, right? Unnatural, inorganic foods, chemicals that are in our foods and in our environment, bleach and things that are poisonous, all created by science, the religion of science. And then they come in and they say, well, there's a problem with what we did, and the fact that we didn't do environmental studies and we didn't figure out how this was going to play out, or we did do that, but the people who run the system said, no, it's fine, right? Don't worry about it. It's fine. Like that's a big part of obscurantism, right? And we all do that. You think this might be a problem, honey? No, it's fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine. And that's a big part of American life, worldwide, global life, where everyone says, oh, it's just fine. Well, because you don't want to stop driving your car, right? You don't want to stop. I mean, we have an unsustainable situation here.
Obscurantism.
We have an unsustainable situation, and obscurantism is a big problem with it. Because science in itself would say, all right, we can do this, we can harvest the oil, we can bring it up, we can turn it into a combustible, and we can put it into this engine, and the engine can expel CO2, but that's going to be a problem. We can't do it in a massive level. Down the road, you're going to get this, you're going to add this to your environment, you're going to be breathing this in, and it's going to destroy life on planet Earth. It's actually going to make the planet hotter or cooler or whatever it might be. You understand this? And so science created this problem here, and now they're coming to all of us who they, through the people who run the money end of this thing, because we also have the religion of money, and the religion of money and the religion of science have combined to create this. And then they're coming to all of us and saying, hey, you guys, you've polluted the planet. You guys, we got to do something. You guys, when you're in your cars and stuff, you're doing all this stuff. You guys suck. No, we don't suck. Like, you guys, should have known this was going to happen. If there is, and it is a negative effect, because you have people on the right, and I know a bunch of you guys believe, oh, pollution isn't a problem. Of course it's a problem, right? Of course doing something like this is a problem. Of course breathing this in is bad for you, right? Just like you don't want to wear a mask because you don't want to breathe in your own CO2. CO2 is a problem. It's just something that, now you have everyone, oh, it's just going to be fine. Just let it go. Because you don't want to give up driving your car. And that's the other problem. That's the other problem with obscurantism.
Obscurantism.
Obscurantism, that's the other problem with it, is that look at what happened when they rolled out the COVID panic and people went and hoarded things in their grocery store. And you went to your grocery store and there was no, toilet paper was like the first to go. Like that was, people were like, oh my God, we got to get toilet paper. But it was, canned food and all these things. I'm going to talk about prepping in some future videos because it's important, obviously. But when you had panic, what did people do? There's run-on banks, and you've seen this before. People panic and they try to grab for themselves, and the system can't. The system, which is not nearly as strong as you have this coming up. Joe Biden's going to give this speech, the State of the Union, and they always say the state of our union is strong. It's not strong. It's a card frickin' house based in the debt-based system and based in energy. And so science gave us oil, which they turned into gas, and then they gave us cars, automobiles. They invented all these things, right? And now science is saying, oops, we shouldn't have done this. This is bad. Well, it's on science. It's on the religion of science. This is just one of many ways that science has hurt us. It's hurt us physically, and it's hurt us morally. It's hurt us in various ways. It made us addicted to things that are bad for us. So here's another way. This is a video from NASA.
Something surrounds you, bombards you, some of which you can't see, touch, or even feel. Every day, everywhere you go. It is odorless and tasteless, yet you use it and depend on it every hour of every day. Without it, the world you know could not exist.
They got a 6 right here, which I've never noticed before. But he said bombards you. He's calling it a weapon, right? He's talking about this as a weapon. Something bombards you. It bombards us all. And, because it is kind of a weapon.
What is it? Electromagnetic radiation. These waves spread across a spectrum from very short gamma rays to X-rays, ultraviolet rays, visible light waves, even longer infrared waves, microwaves, to radio waves which can measure longer than a mountain range. This spectrum is the foundation of the information age and of our modern world. Your radio, remote control, text message, television, microwave oven, even a doctor's X-ray, all depend on waves within the electromagnetic spectrum.
So we already know that microwaves, what they do to physical matter. If you put a chicken in a microwave and you nuke it, it heats it up, but also it'll rearrange it on a molecular structure. You'll see the difference, right? Anything you put in there, the microwave, right? And so microwaves are part of our life now. We're all getting bombarded with microwaves, for example. Also, we know about radiation, like X-rays. People got X-rays like, let's just X-ray ourselves. My brother said he went to a shoe store when he was a kid. He's in his 70s now. And they had an X-ray machine there to see how big your foot was. That's how science gets stupid. Like, look, we've invented this, X-ray, the discoverer of radiation. Madame Curie, is that who did it? Is it Madame Curie who's discovered radium or whatever? I don't know, they made a movie about this recently. It doesn't matter, but there was this woman who's discovered radium, and she died of cancer. And so we know that a lot of these things, already we know, just from science itself, that they're harmful. And they've introduced this to all of us. This is something the religion of science has brought to us, the age of science has brought to us, and it's hurtful. It's hurtful to all of us.
So, as you sit watching TV, not only are there visible light waves from the TV striking your eyes, but also radio waves transmitting from a nearby station, and microwaves carrying cell phone calls and text messages, and waves from your neighbor's Wi-Fi, and GPS units in the cars driving by. There is a chaos of waves from all across the spectrum passing through your room right now.
And your body. And so what he doesn't know yet, because it's an older video, is that there were going to be millimeter waves, which is 5G. So the religion of science has created the ability to use these waves as information conductors, where now information can come to us through these waves. But what science hasn't done is say, all right, how is this going to affect people? Or, more likely, they know how it's going to affect people. Millimeter waves are even more powerful than microwaves. And so 5G is millimeter waves, 4G is microwaves. And so now they've introduced millimeter waves, and it's going to affect the environment, it's going to affect living beings, And science is either withholding this information because the money people are saying, don't tell people about this. And so this is going to cause problems. One of the problems is infertility. There's all these different problems. There's all these different health problems that this is going to cause in people. You understand this. And there's this thing called neurasthenia. I've talked about this in so many videos. This Russian doctor figured out that there was all these emotional nervous system disorders that we now know as psychological conditions that are a plague on human beings that were created when electricity started to be used. That telegraph workers, so if you know what a telegraph was this, these wires that were placed from one place to another, and there would be these telegraph operators that were operating in like Morse code, and they were banging on these keys, and they started to develop depression and all these other nervous system disorders that were, now a part of modern day psychology. And so science knew that this was bad for all of us, even in the very beginning. Adding electricity to our lives. We're mostly water. We're conductors of electricity, and these various waves affect us, affect everything in our system. It's said over and over again in these whispers messages, again, these spiritual messages, that these electromagnetic poisoning, and that's what it's called, is something that hurts all of us, right? It hurts us on a spiritual level. It disrupts our subtle bodies and creates a barrier for us to connect with God. And now we have all this like a web around us, not only just in terms of these electromagnetic waves, but satellites that are beaming crap to us that surrounds and makes sort of a web around our world, right? And so all of these things are brought to you by the religion of science. And it's the religion of science because it isn't pure science. Because pure science would have said, well, we've invented this thing, but we have to be very cautious with it. We can't roll it out and, like the way that we've done without it having a negative effect on life on planet Earth and polluting planet Earth, either with CO2 emissions or what what oil was supposed to do, why God put oil into this planet. We have to do it in a measured way. But instead, we just used it to engulf the world in pollution and of all kinds. And now science says, hey, guess what? You guys polluted the world, but science is here to rescue you. No, you guys are the ones who screwed up in the first place. And the people that paid your bills, the money people, and using obscurantism and lying to us and not saying that there were going to be negative effects. Because now people are dependent on cars and dependent on their cell phones, and they don't want to give them up. They don't want to hear anything about how it's not sustainable. And, science in a way brought us the, global economic system that we now have, the way that money is used on the digital age, and that's created another problem. And then you have things like GMO foods, right? All these things that now, because people live in cities, which were created by science, the religion of science, and they didn't do proper environmental impact on what cities were going to do to the world and to you psychologically. Like all these things are creating, people being less than. We're now so unnatural and people are messed up psychologically from our lifestyle. Also what watching TV and staring at screens all day, playing video games is going to do to you psychologically. Like science should know about that, right? The science of psychology as well as the science of electromagnetic poisoning, understanding all these things, how that was going to play on people in the future. Again, obscurantism. Oh, it'll be all right. Don't worry about it. Oh, we'll be fine, right? No, if you're going to use science, then you have to use it the whole way. You have to discover something and then discover how it's going to affect everybody and everything. People like the Amish, I'm told, I read about, that they're not against technology. They don't want to bring anything in that's going to divide the family. So they'll bring a technology in. Some of the leaders would bring technology in, and they would see how the family members would react to it, right? So you bring a cell phone into your house or to a family, and next thing you know, no one's talking to each other because everyone's on the internet communicating with cell phones, and you have people sitting around a dinner table, everybody, talking on the cell phone and they're not connecting to the people in the room with them. And so it divides the family. And we know this psychologically, how these things affect people. Pornography, right? Rolling out pornography, which makes up 1/3 of the internet, and young children getting access to it, because that's what happens, it's going to happen, how that's going to affect them in terms of, learning about things before they're ready to learn about it, learning about it in this grotesque way of pornography that's loveless and soulless, right? It's the worst example of people coming together, paid in a, prostitution type of way, often using drugs and things, with all these people watching them, right? And so it's just gross, and it's, all these things. So how that's going to affect the way people relate to each other in marriage and couples and things. All these young people get addicted to pornography. Of course, like I said, the GMO foods, all these other things. There's all these things that science has brought to us in one way or another, and they've created problems. And, if it was true science, they would say, all right, this is the side effects to this. This is what's going to happen to you if we introduce them. But they never said that. They never told us. They never told, the common people, because the money people didn't want to. Oh, this is going to be great. Look, this newfangled chemical. Next thing you know, let's spray DDT all over the place. Oh, look, there are no birds of prey anymore. DDT was this chemical they rolled out and sprayed it on everything, just like GMO foods. No, science, just trust the science. And then what happened was you had all these insects that had DDT on them, and birds would eat them, birds that eat insects would eat them, and then birds like falcons would eat tons of pigeons that were loaded with DDT, and then the falcons started to lay eggs, and their eggshells were too weak to support their babies, their offspring, and we almost wiped out falcons, right? And then science was like, all right, we're wiping out birds, and it's probably not good for everybody. We got to get rid of DDT. There was commercials back in the 50s or 60s, DDT is good for me, right?
Pesticides weren't always thought to be harmful. To the contrary. In 1947, Time magazine carried an advertisement claiming DDT was good for people, homes, and farms. It took 20 years before scientists realized how dangerous it was.
It begins with the war-born development of DDT. This diabolical weapon of modern science saved millions of humans, but killed billions of insects. Man, with this newly discovered force, has at long last gained the upper hand in our age-old struggle. The really heavy blow fell only a few months ago. It came from laboratories where top scientists from famous universities and from industrial and government organizations collaborated to develop something new and different. They succeeded. They perfected Pestroy, the most effective weapon man has ever wielded against insects. In both its forms, powder and liquid, Pestroy means doomsday to us insects. For this new insect destroyer contains a lot of DDT, not just a little. Its DDT content is even higher than government specifications. But the really sure kill feature of this insect killer isn't simply that it contains DDT, it's the way that it makes sure that bugs get the DDT that's in it.
This was science. Science creating something. The religion of economics came in and said, all right, look, let's just use all this stuff. Let's use these chemicals. What's going to be the problem? What's the harm in pesticides? And now we have Monsanto stuff and GMO foods and things like this. Getting rid of organic heirloom seeds and organic food. And that has health effects, not only on us, but the environment. It affects everything. And so the next time your liberal friends say, hey, trust the science and science is better than religion, say, yeah, what about global warming? They're like, do you think religion, do you think Christianity created global warming? Do you think Buddhism created global warming, right? You guys believe in global warming, right? You're a liberal. You believe in science. Well, science really effed us over with that, right? Science really screwed us over, by these scientific discoveries that brought us oil and gas and combustible engines and all these things, and now we have a problem. So your religion of science sucks. And I know you're saying, well, you religious people, you Christians are saying, well, we got to go back, because that was the whole thing with Trump, make America great again. It was going back to the authority of religion, and that sucked as well. The authority of religion is just as warped because of the same principles. It's not pure. If science is pure, science is great. The pursuit of godly knowledge, right? You have the pursuit of physical knowledge, the scientific knowledge, right, of our physical universe. And spirituality is the knowledge of the divine universe, the abstract universe, right? We have the causal body, the soul, the nature of the soul, the nature of divinity, and the pursuit of divine knowledge and divine experience also is a part of that. And you have the pursuit of scientific knowledge, scientific experience, and that's physical knowledge. In the heartfulness system, both are valued. The last two masters specifically, Master Charji and Daji, were both very much into science, because that's how it should be. You should be into both science and spirituality. That both of them in the pure form are the pursuit of knowledge, but also balanced with, the effects of such things, right? Understanding how something plays out, not just discovering something and then using it without figuring out there's going to be problems later on, both in religion and both in science, in this purest form. And then you have to be open to change when new knowledge comes your way. So this is one of the big problems. Another big problem is, in the Whispers of the Brighter World messages, it talks about that there is a pure energy that is cheap and clean that will be available, I think, in like 50 years. That there'll be this energy, whatever is left of civilization, that is being blocked from being used. It wouldn't be used right now because the oil company and the electric company and all these various types of powerful institutions, economic institutions, that are, saying science this and science that, wouldn't allow a clean energy that could change everything. Then we wouldn't have to worry about all these things. This clean energy that's available, but it's going to be out of desperation, it says in the Whispers message. It's going to be out of desperation that we adopt this clean energy, because we can't do anything else, right? After things have broken down completely, the world's polluted, and we're having trouble breathing and all these things because of, another thing, nuclear power, right? These nuclear bombs and these radioactive plants. Another way, science has brought to us these machines of death that are just hanging over our head like Damocles' sword, right? Science is screwing us over there as well, because those things always end up, all these things end up having some sort of disastrous effect in the end. And so, there's this element of obstruction to, okay, this isn't working, we have to do something else. No, we don't. I represent the oil company. We're not giving up this. We're not giving up our power. I represent the electric company, because this energy that's out there, and Babaji didn't specify what it was, is cheap, and so it can't be controlled. And so the element of control is the problem. The same thing with religion. This is where control, controlling something, perverting the information, preventing the full information from coming out, obscurantism, right? We've just been talking about this over and over again. This is the need for the truth community, is because information is being warped, or is disinformation, or it's partial information, and this is what's causing the problem. And people's inability collectively to be mature enough to give up things that are hurting them. Because think about in your own life. What are you doing that is bad for you? Are you smoking cigarettes, right? Are you using alcohol? Now that you've heard that, electricity is bad for you, you could do your own research and say, all right, this guy just said this stuff about electricity, electromagnetic poisoning. I'm going to turn off the internet for a day in my house and go outside to where, go camping for a couple of days and see how I feel. Do I feel better? Do I feel less anxious and less nervous? Let's say you have psychological issues and things like this. You get away from these things. You experiment for yourself. You don't take my word for it. You don't take anybody's word for it. You say, I'm going to, figure this thing out for myself. I'm going to go out into the woods and breathe fresh air and be away from all of these signals, right? When my family and I went camping where the sequoia trees were, and there was no GPS, right? We were driving and our GPS went out. And then there was, we were like, wow, there's no, and going out into the woods, there's still signals now. You really can't escape it, but you can lessen it, right? You can go to an area where there's less of it and just see how it feels, right? Eating processed food. So all of us are doing things that are bad for us. Like I do this job and I know, being on the internet has a negative effect on me. I balance it out. I'm supposed to do this job. God's, I believe that this is my divine assignment, doing this job, making these videos. And I have lots of evidence to support that. But I realize that it's having negative effects on me just in terms of I was never on the computer that much. Now I'm on the computer a lot more. But what I do is go out for walks and do things around our homestead, get outside, balance it out, right? Do things to keep myself healthy. And, this idea that I'm in remembrance of God and, God is with me while I'm doing this, it lessens the effects. But at some point, I'm going to have to let it go, right? I'm just going to have to do something else. I've done things before, and then, that ends, and you have to do something else. But people don't want to do that, right? People don't want to give things up and realize, okay, we've been doing this thing, we're dependent on it, we like it, but it's bad for us, it's bad for the planet, it's bad for the environment. So what are we going to do differently? And the solution given by the people who control the system is, well, we're going to still do all these things, we're going to still have all these things, but we're going to take them away from you. You're going to go to Agenda 21 housing, right? We're getting rid of your cars, we're getting rid of your cows, right? All these things, because we blocked the information that this thing would eventually happen. Because scientists should have known, some of them have spoken up about all of these things. They realize that these things have a negative effect on people. There was neurasthenia back in the 20s and 30s where this Russian doctor said, look at all these nervous disorders that became, a big part of the DSM-5 now, all these various psychological diagnoses. But people say, let's just, don't listen to that guy. This electricity thing's a good thing. Let's roll it out on a global basis, right? I mean, there was a battle between Tesla and Edison. Edison wanted direct current, and Tesla wanted alternating current. And, direct current's even worse, right? It's even more dangerous, and it's, even more raw. It would have had even a worse effect. But you have this group of people that are, and maybe it's all people, it's just, the ones that see an opportunity, right? They're opportunists, that they say, all right, we have this information, this scientific information, and I'll get into, religious organizations, how they did this. I've talked about that in the past. How can we use this? How can we use this to create profit and power for ourselves? How can we take partial bits of information mixed with, obscurantism, right? How do we take partial bits of information, put out some disinformation, and control people, and have wealth and power and things for ourselves? And that's what happened with science. It's also what happened with religion. So people who are like, well, I wish we could get rid of science and go back to where religion dominated. Well, religion sucked for years. Religion has done all kinds of damage, even worse damage, because whatever happens to you on a physical level here, the religion of science affects your physical being. I guess to some extent can interrupt your soul's existence or whatever, have a negative effect on your spiritual existence, but it's limited to your life on planet Earth where they have control over you. But religions block people's connection to God. And I've talked about this. People say, well, Bible this, Bible that. Well, there's, out and out lies in the Bible. The big example is John 3:16. I've talked about this so much. The idea that Jesus, you can only connect to God through Jesus. This is something that's not true. That's, fundamentally not true. And Christianity wouldn't have a hold on, wouldn't have some copyright or trademark of God for their followers. Like how many Christian people would go and do something else or be open to, wouldn't give money and things if they believed that their religion wasn't the only way. Right? You understand this? And I'm not talking just about Christianity, all religions. I'm talking about this specific teaching in Christianity, John 3:16, that says Jesus is the only way and path to God, that you can only connect to God connect to the Father through the Son. And it's just simply not true. You can prove this to yourself. You can see that this is a lie by seeing or experiencing other people who do other types of forms of religion or spirituality, and you can see that they're connected to God in one way or another. I have this issue all the time where people literally can experience the divinity within, my videos and things like this, my connection to God through the heartfulness meditation. They think I'm Christian, and then they find out I do something else, and they're like, oh, wow, you deceived me. No, you actually experienced that there was I have a connection to God through my own spiritual practice. I was born as a Catholic. I was born into the same sort of indoctrination system. I know people say there's a difference between Catholicism and being a Christian, but it's very similar, right? You understand Catholicism was the original Christianity, and King Henry VIII, right, the guy who had all those wives, didn't want to kill his wives anymore, wanted to get divorced, and so he, created what's now become Christianity aside from Catholicism. And it wasn't because he was some brilliant saint and he wanted to break away from the Catholic Church because it was oppressive. He wanted religious control. He wanted to be able to do what he wanted to do, which was divorce. And so that's, how the Christian religion began. That because a king wanted to get divorced, wanted to bring in legal divorce, which Catholicism wouldn't grant him, he created his own religion, which is like pure obscurantism, right? It's purely there because he wasn't doing it because it was a good thing. He was doing it because he wanted to, get divorced. But anyways, going back to the original point of this thing, and this is something my mom said, I gave this story before, that I think we were in like Ottawa, Canada, and we saw these native peoples. And my mom, I was in like 7th, 8th grade or something like this, right? My mom said, these people are, I can't believe these people would be considered ungodly, that they would go into hell because, and I didn't really understand what she was saying because, I'd read the Bible, but I didn't have the conceptual ability. And she was talking about how she saw these people as having a connection to God. She saw the spirituality she saw their connection within them. And she was confronted with this problem with her, she was a devout Catholic, that she believed in the Catholic teachings or the teachings of the Bible, but she was seeing that these other people that did something else also had a connection with God. And this is, again, obscurantism, because you look at all these religious wars, you look at all the crusades, you look at how the, English people and the French people, the Spanish people came to America and they found these Aboriginal people and they said they're savages. They're going to hell. Because, so many of you Christians believe everyone else is going to hell. That's what you've been taught, and it's not true. And so you think you're saving them, right? You understand this? You think you're saving people, other people. That's what people thought. And so when they persecuted them and they turned them into slaves or whatever it was, they thought they were rescuing them. They thought they were rescuing them from hell. And so they gave themselves permission to be abusive, to be, this was the attitude, to subjugate them, right? Turn them into your subjects. And this was, again, all obscurantism. It's all a lie. My mom later went on to do the heartfulness system. I've talked about this before, that I was made a trainer. I was a trainer for a while, the heartfulness system. And I was receiving the last sitting. I got these individual sittings where there was this deep cleaning that was done. 3 of them were met with Master Chargy, and another, I think 5, I think I got a total of 8, were with senior preceptors. And the last sitting, I went to Master Chargy's house, and he was cleaning, doing a deep cleaning, and I was having the worst thoughts, and I felt horrible. Like I didn't know what was going on. I knew there was cleaning going on, but I was embarrassed because I figured he was hearing all this stuff. And there was just all these negative things, like the worst possible things were coming to my mind. And it felt like almost like a spiritual wind was being like it was a hurricane was behind me. It was just forcing all this stuff out, like he was pulling it out of me. And then I just felt completely like, just blissful and clean. And I thought about my mom. My mom and my grandmother said the rosary for years and prayed for everyone in the family. My grandmother lived to 97. In the Catholic tradition, you have these beads, and you say one Our Father and 5 Hail Marys. And each, you go around the beads and you say all these prayers. I don't know how many, But there's a big bead that represents the Our Father, and then 5 little beads that represents the Hail Mary. These were the 2 big prayers in Catholicism. When I was a kid, we went to these things called catechism, which every Sunday or one day a week we would go and get trained on how to say these prayers and do these things. And I got mono, and I missed out on learning how to say the Hail Mary. I knew the Our Father, but didn't say the Hail Mary. And then it came time for me to go to confession. You go into these confessionals, and you confess your sins, so-called sins, to the priest. And the priest says, go say, my case, 5 Hail Marys. But I didn't know how to say the prayer because I'd been sick, right? So I went back to these things called the pews, right? These seats. And there's this kid there, another kid. I'm like, they just told me to say 5 Hail Marys, and I don't know the prayer. I said, I was sick. And the kid goes, you know what? I got 3 Our Fathers, and they're actually kind of harder to say and longer. So he traded me. He traded me his 3 Our Fathers for my 5 Hail Marys. I was like, good. I said my prayer, because I was into it. But anyway, so my mom, I had these thoughts about my mom, and just tears came to my eyes. Just this, feeling. And then there was this, they give this energy. They charge one of the spiritual points, the masters of the system, to make somebody a trainer. And I felt this complete bliss. And then I went back home, and my mom, I said I had these sittings, and my mom said, I want to start. She wanted to start the Heartfulness Meditation. And there was these preceptors, these trainers in Boca Raton. This woman was Haitian, and these really nice, sweet Haitian ladies. And they had been formerly Catholics. They used to be Catholics themselves, and they were doing the, meditation. My mom went over there. My mom loved them. They were really sweet, and she went there and got sittings from them. And then Master Charji came to the Molina Ashram, and my mom came to the gathering. My mom and my dad. My dad actually did some of the meditations. My dad was mad at God, right? Like one of my older brother went to Vietnam, and my next sister, my next sibling, was sort of a hippie. And so my brother was more, he was liberal in some ways, but conservative in others. He was a truther. And, he didn't really practice religion either, but he became a member of the Heartfulness system. He thought I joined a cult, so he went and tried it, and he got hooked, He got, into it. He started reading the literature, but he was worried about me, so that's what he says. My sister was an atheist, and we were all there on Christmas morning. We'd all go to church on Christmas morning. And my brother had his own family, but the rest of us. And my dad said to my sister, what's a nice atheist like you doing in a place like this? And they started to crack up, and I just started to crack up. I didn't hear it, but, there's many examples of me, I always had a problem laughing at, inappropriate times. When you weren't supposed to laugh. I just it's something that when I'm not supposed to laugh, I find that funny. And so I have problems not laughing at those times. When I was 5 years old, I think I was 5, I might have been younger, but it's one of my first memories. And my mom took me to Saturday Mass. There's a Saturday Mass at 7:30, so you didn't have to go on Sunday if we had something on Sunday or whatever. And my mom going to that Mass, but there was almost nobody there. And we were in this church that sat probably a couple hundred people. And there was just me, my mom, and these 3 ladies sitting behind us, and then a few other people. And it was very, if you made any noise, the church was like an amphitheater. And so I was being fidgety and just, I was restless or whatever, a little kid is in church. And 3 rows behind me was these older women. And this older woman was sort of glaring at me, right? And I would look at her, and I would just stare at her, and she would stare away, but she was looking over at me, shut up, that kid kind of thing. So I kept on looking over my shoulder, and I saw that she was staring at me, in a sort of glowering way, but as soon as I'd look at her, she'd look away. And so I wanted to catch her and, staring at me. And so she was over, my left shoulder, 3 rows behind us and a little bit to the left. And so I moved my head in a very circular fashion and then whipped it around really quickly, really fast. So I looked right at her, and her eyes got big as saucers, right? And she looked away, all flustered, and I just burst out laughing. I couldn't stop laughing. And then my laughter echoed through the church, right? And my mom grabs me by the arm. You know how you're a little kid and you're at a store or something, you just stopped walking. And I couldn't walk. And she's just dragging me out of the church as I'm laughing hysterically. And you could hear it bouncing off and reverberating, But again, I was a little kid. I don't know, how much trouble I got in. I'm sure I got into something, but it was, for me, it probably was worth it because I had this, moment of joy. But anyways, so my mom came to this gathering, and my brother was the caretaker of the ashram by then in Georgia. Master Chargy used to come like once a year in the summer. And my mom was there. My brother comes up to me and says, right before group meditation, Master Chargy would be going to group meditation. And my brother used to drive him in the golf cart. They had a golf cart at the ashram, and Master Chargy had leg issues. He had, he was older, and he had problems walking for distances. Sometimes he'd walk, right, because he liked to walk, but, And my brother said right before group meditation, be by the place where Master Chargy slept, where he'd be coming out, and Mom will be there, and you can introduce her to Master Chargy, and which is nice on his part, right? Because, he could have done it, but he said, whatever, I want you to do it. And Master Chargy came out, and he was just really soft. And my mom had this sort of spiritual, glow. There's times my mom could be she just have this. We used to go to these charismatic prayer meetings when I was, 7 or 8 years old, and people would be, speaking in tongues, and they would pray with their hands up and things. But there was real spiritual energy there. I remember experiencing it. My mom had these prayer meetings at our house, and there were nuns there, and they were really, nice ladies. You hear this stuff about nuns sucking, people going to Catholic school and, getting, if you hear that song by Death Cab for Cutie, the Follow You Into the Dark, and there's a line where he says, I got my knuckles bruised by a lady in black, and she told me that fear was the heart of love, so I never went back. It's actually a well-written song. And so, people have this negative association with nuns, but my association with nuns and priests were always good, right? The Catholic Church didn't do anything to me bad, right? There was no negativity. In fact, it was, it benefited me, but it was something where eventually I graduated from it. And so my mom was there, and she's just soft, and she had this spiritual energy, right? And Master Chargy came out, his eyes were soft, and he just had this loving energy. And most of the times when I've interacted with him, it was fairly gruff, right? He was always, Romano, he was a big guy, and he had sort of a gruff voice. And, sometimes he had, he exhibited all the human emotions. He just wasn't some guy faking to be serene and spiritual all the time. He was, you never know what you were going to get when you interacted with him. In terms of sometimes he could be, intense, sometimes he could be, you never knew what you were going to get. And so he came out, and he just had these soft eyes, and my mom was just in this grateful mood. And she said to him, I'm grateful. She was thanking him. I'm grateful for this opportunity to be here with you. I said, Master Chargy, this is my mom, Rita Romano. My brother was sitting by the golf cart, out. So there's a deck where Master Chargy was coming out, a little outside hallway. And so my brother was sitting behind us in the golf cart, and Master Chargy looked at me and then, looked at my brother and said, thank you for the wonderful gift of your 2 fine sons, which was, kind of a shocker to me. And there's just this wave of love that passed over. I mean, I was emotional, right? I was just, I just felt really good, and I felt really good for my mom. And there was a young Indian man there, he was in his, early 20s, and he was standing right there next to us. And years later, he came up to me and said, when I met this guy, we were talking, nice guy, lived in Houston, but he was from, some part of India. And I saw him, and he was just really an upbeat, really happy-go-lucky person, just one of those really nice, happy, saintly persons. And he said, I was there when you introduced your mom. I said, oh, yeah, I remember you. And he goes, I thought that in that moment that Master Chargy was giving your mom liberation. Because he said, in the Indian tradition, you work for your parents' liberations, which is, not really a part of the heartfulness system, but it is part of that, for that part of the world, this is what they believe, that you work for your parents' spiritual benefit, elevation. The children work for their parents' spiritual liberation and things like this. And he said, in that moment, I felt like he was, liberating your mom. And I said, yeah, I knew something happened. I don't know it was that or not, right? But there was just something great. And so I was in India, and Master Chargy had just passed away. So he died in 2014 in December. And then a month later in January of 2015, my mom died. And there was these various gatherings. Master Chargy was too old to go to other countries. He used to travel around the world and go to these other countries, America and Europe and, Africa and Russia and these various, places all around the world. And there was these centers, and they would have the national gathering for that country. But now people were coming to Chennai, India at the ashram, and he was having a Latin-speaking, a Spanish-speaking gathering. So people who spoke Spanish from all over the world were there at that time. And these women from Haiti, right, were there. And they came up to me at the ashram and said, Paul, I heard your mother died. And they really just, these saintly women, right, who were, one of them's named Maria, right, Mary, Mother Mary, after Mother Mary. Just nice, loving, sweet women, right? And they come up and they're like, oh, Paul, we're so sorry to hear about this. And I'm thinking, of all the people that knew my mother in terms of the heartfulness system, it was really just these women. Like, these were the only people that knew my mom. My brother was in Boca Raton, Florida. He was there around, my mom, taking care of her. Sometimes he would be up at the ashram in Georgia, but he was in that area. And I'm thinking, the only other people other than my brother that know my mom and know her in any real capacity, because she used to go over to this woman's house and do the meditation, was these women. And she just happened to die when these women were in India for this Spanish-speaking gathering. Like, this is, they probably have gone to India 5 or 6, 7 times maybe at most in their lives, but probably even less. Maybe this was the first time they were ever in India. I don't know. But it wasn't something that would normally happen. And it just happened like there was a week-long gathering, and these women were there for, a period of a week. And then through this big ashram that's over 20 acres, and there was a lot of people there, thousands of people, we just happened to bump into each other like the day of my mom dying. And they had heard about it, and, which was odd in itself. And they just came up to me, and they were just really sweet and loving. And it was just, almost like a sort of miraculous thing. And then the next day, or maybe later that day, I was walking by, there's a garden area, and there came Master Kamlesh Daji, who had just become the, master of the system. And he came up to me and said, I heard about your mom, and he patted me on the shoulder. And I just felt like she was taken care of. There was just this, deep feeling, from these experiences that, the religion that she grew up in, and she always, was going to identify as a Catholic, and she started and did the heartfulness meditation, and she experienced God through the system. She knew that it was beneficial, and she was happy for me and my brother because she realized this was a good thing. And neither one of us was pursuing God. We both walked away from our religious beliefs at various points in our life, but we came back to God through the heartfulness system, and my mom was happy, and I felt she was taken care of. And I think no matter, how much of her religion she did, the living aspect and the dynamic aspect of the heartfulness system is what, gave her whatever she got when she died, in terms of where she is now, in terms of maybe being liberated from this planet or whatever it is, she got it from this system. A big part of what I'm saying here is there's the lies, there's the obscurantism, there's the deception, right? This is where people realize they have the power of some knowledge. They're in control of knowledge, scientific knowledge, religious knowledge, whatever it might be, godly knowledge, and they become the middleman between you. They tell you what the knowledge is, and therefore, since they have the knowledge, they have superior decision-making abilities, and therefore you have to kowtow to whatever it might be. Religious authority, scientific authority, medical science authority that we see now, right, with COVID. We're the authority, we know more than you, and therefore we get to lord over you and tell you what to do, how to behave, because we're the gatekeepers. We're the gatekeepers between you and this truth, and we'll disseminate the truth the way we see fit, right? And they also will manipulate the truth to aggrandize their position. So this is what happened with John 3:16, the religious leaders, the early Christian leaders. Again, the Bible was written in Aramaic and, I guess some parts possibly in Hebrew. It was translated to Latin and then eventually to English, maybe some other languages in between. Eventually it was translated into English. It was changed and manipulated by various, the Council of Nicaea, or the various churches, you compared various versions of the Bible, and they're all different. They have different wording, they have different meaning in terms of some of the teachings. And so this is, again, something that's been manipulated, something that isn't in its purest form. And even when it was given, Jesus didn't write the Bible. It was written by his disciples, each one having a different lens. Most of the teachings came after Jesus' death in some channeled type of situation. St. Paul never even met Jesus. He was a persecutor of Christians who came after Jesus, right? So he didn't even meet him physically, but a lot of his teachings was him connecting to God or Jesus and giving these channeled messages. And so the religious authority became a middleman between people and the teachings of Jesus, their parishioners. In fact, you were not able to own a Bible. People weren't able to own a personal Bible and read it themselves. That was something that was left only to the clergy. And so that's where Lutheranism started, right? This guy, Martin Luther, wanted people to read the Bible for themselves. It was written in Latin. Most people couldn't read at the time. And so this was something that changed over the years. But in terms of the churches, the various Catholic and Protestant churches, they controlled your spiritual destiny because they said there was only one pathway to heaven and they controlled that pathway. And so this gave them enormous amount of power and changed, so much in terms of world history. And these other religions have similar beliefs. Each religion claiming they're the only sole religion, they're the only legitimate one. And if you don't follow that religion, you're going to hell. The other piece to this is it's also about experience. Experiential learning versus book learning. For example, my mother read the Bible and she believed in the Bible. She, very devout religious person. But then she had the experience of other people doing something else and she could see their connection to God. She could see they had a connection to God and that they weren't going to hell. And so her experience told her something different. Also, with going back to science, you have scientific knowledge, which is in theory. They work out the math, they work out, their theory, and then they have their experience, then they have experiments, and their experiments reveal different information, things that they couldn't, factor in, factors that they weren't aware of, or whatever it might be. And so experience is also important, that you put out this knowledge, you have a theory, or you have book knowledge, and then it becomes physical knowledge, and it becomes experiential knowledge. I've talked about this with COVID. Like in the beginning, I didn't know whether COVID was real or not. I didn't know if there was some sort of disease, again, until I had it, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's real. And not that I get some sort of COVID merit badge, but I know it's real more than somebody who watches a video on the internet. You get all these people who make up their minds based in, oh, I saw this video, I read this article, I saw this doctor, and they say it's all fake, COVID's fake, you had the flu. Well, I know more than you because I had it. I had a moderate case of it, almost a severe case of it, and I know that it's not the flu. You can say it's the flu, and I know there'll be a bunch of dopes. No, you did have the flu, so there, because I know, I'm a big knower, I watched a video, and I know, right? And so experiential knowledge, there's lots of people who have, didn't believe in COVID until they got it. And I, was skeptical. And I'm not saying the official story of what they say it is. I don't know if it's a virus or not. I don't know if it's man-made or not. I speculate that it's some sort of biological weapon because of the way it's been rolled out and how much it's changed everything on a global basis. So I don't think it's accidental. I think it's, I don't know, but I believe that it is something that's being rolled out by the powers that be for all the reasons that we see going on around us. But I do know that the sickness is not the flu. When you get it, you'll know. Like when you get a moderate case or you have a loved one that gets it, it's no joke, right? It's the worst sickness I've ever had. But before that, I just had book knowledge. I was doing research. I was seeing what was going on, and I wasn't sure, are people really getting sick? Is this real? Whatever. I didn't know. Like I had no way of really knowing because the government lies, right? Obscurantism. And so, the government lies, the people who control the power lie, or they withhold information. But at least in terms of the illness, having had the experience, I know the illness is real. And people can say, no, you don't. Yeah, all right, whatever. Talk to me when you get it, right? Talk to me when you have a loved one that gets it, and then you can tell me how real it isn't, right? And I don't mean some moderate case, because there's plenty of people that have tested false positively. They have a false positive test, and they have a cold, or maybe they have the flu, whatever. Maybe they just have a mild case. Doesn't matter. But to them, they don't know, right? They don't know. There's people who have no symptoms. They're asymptomatic, and they've been exposed to it. But the people who have had severe, weird, losing their taste, losing their smell, heart fluctuations or fluttering or palpitations, heart arrhythmia issues, purple toes. I mean, these things that are, people are exhibiting weird symptoms. There's people who have had to have limbs amputated. And so, yeah, for those people, they know it's, there's something weird going on here, and they have a weird experience. And the experience is superior to book learning and theories, and everyone should understand that. Your experience of something reveals a lot more information than reading about it. There's nothing wrong with reading and having book knowledge, but until you apply that book knowledge in life, until you use that book knowledge, there's plenty of, religious scholars, right? People who are, theologists. They teach religion. They teach spiritual and godly knowledge. And they, they're worth listening to. They have godly knowledge. They can cite scripture and verse, right? Biblical scholars of the Vedas and, India. I mean, there's people who know a lot of things about God. There was a prominent godly scholar in the Heartfulness meditation, but then he had the experience of these things. He had the experience, and he had more knowledge, at least book knowledge, than Babaji, but he became Babaji's disciple. He's one of the guys who was influential in teaching Master Charji about so many different, theological things and knowledge about scripture and all these, the collective works of divine book knowledge. But it's your experience of God that's important. The Heartfulness system is about the experience of God. The Heartfulness system doesn't say, or says, actually says that a lot of these other practices and religions are legitimate. They don't delegitimize anything else. They don't say the Heartfulness system is the only system, but it's an experiential system where you get an experience of God. You get to, be in relationship with God. You could read about somebody, or you could meet them and experience their energy. And it gives people an internal experience through the transmission and cleaning. There was one person that came and said, Babaji, can you teach me about God? And he said, well, I can't teach you about God, but I can help you have an experience of God. And that's, that's what makes Heartfulness a spiritual system. And again, it's not about the organization, right? Religions, it's all focused on the organization, bringing in money for the organization, bringing in followers of the organization, bringing in people that you can control because you control the organization. So that's why science is a religion, because it's a club, it's a closed club of scientists and people who control the scientists. Because scientists are influenced by the people that pay their salary and control them and are, whatever, might even threaten them. Scientists are always worried about their reputation, right? Where a bunch of scientists come up with a theory and they say this is now fact. The scientific, power, the power brokers in the scientific community said this is what we believe. And scientists who can prove that that's not true, they disappear, right? They're ostracized, they're humiliated, they're, called whatever. They're said their work isn't scientific, even though they've come up with the right answer. And they come up with the experience, right? They have experiments to prove it. But the scientific knowledge and the people that control the science, right? The people who control the scientists can warp this teaching any way they want. Just like the people who control religions can warp the teaching any way they want, and they do, because they're liars. They're people who want lots of power, and they use obscurantism. This is, the point of this video. And so much of what we see now as problems that they're complaining about, problems of human creation, all had their roots in science. But then they come in and say, we're the only ones who can solve the problem. We're the scientists. Well, you guys are the ones who created it, yeah? Well, yeah, but we're the only ones who can solve it. Why? You guys are the problem creators. What about other people who didn't create the problem? Maybe they were better suited to solve the problem. The same thing happened with the financial crisis of 2008. The financial crisis happened, and then Congress and the politicians turned the solution over to the very same bankers that created the problem. The CDC has been a disaster. They've been, horrible on autism. Autism has, under their watch since 1970, it used to be 10,000, 1 out of 10,000. Now it's like 1 out of 50. There's been an autism explosion. They haven't solved cancer. They haven't solved heart disease. They really haven't done much with AIDS. And yet they're the ones in charge of COVID, right? When they have that kind of a track record. Like these, power brokers who are constantly failing. Religions, people's morality is going down. People are disconnected from God, right? Religions have failed connecting people to God, and most godly people are, they're book knowledge people, and they're pretty pompous and arrogant about it. Oh, I know so much. What you're doing is gonna, what you're doing meditating is gonna get you in touch with demons. I read it about it. I saw a video about it, right? All right, go somewhere else, right? You binary F, right? Off and on, left and right. All these people who don't have the capability of abstract thought, and they don't have experiential knowledge, but they want to tell people how great they are. If I was, let's say, on a desert island and I needed an operation, and there was a nurse who was a surgical nurse who had been involved in thousands of surgeries, and then there was a, aspiring doctor who was studying to be a surgeon but had never experienced doing surgery, hadn't done any surgery. They had book knowledge versus the nurse who had experiential knowledge. I would choose the nurse to do the surgery. You understand this? Because experience to me is much more valuable. Not that book learning, not that knowledge isn't valuable, but experience is better, especially if you experience things the right way. If you're participating in, the right way of doing something that's effective. If you're just going to practice, like let's say you go play basketball and you miss shot after shot and you're just practicing missing, well, that's not real experience. That's not real practice. You want to practice putting the ball in the hoop, right? There's a great story from the solution-focused therapy. They use this as an example because solution-focused therapy is different because they spend only the first few sessions on the problem and the rest is on the solution. Whereas most therapists, most modalities of psychology spend most of the time focusing on the problem. In solution-focused therapy, there's this book I read when I was in, my graduate school, and it was very similar to the heartfulness meditation way of thinking about things. And there was a batter, for a baseball team who was in a slump. And his hitting coach came up to him and said, what are you doing to get out of your slump? He goes, I'm watching videotapes of my swing so I can fix it. They said, well, you were hitting the ball pretty good a couple months ago. Why don't you go watch videotape of what you were doing then and then practice that, right? Go back to when you were hitting the ball and see what you were doing then and, relearn what you did then. And the guy did that, and he ended up getting out of the slump and having, one of his best years. And so this is solution-focused therapy, but it's also the heartfulness meditation. Experience doing things the right way, internally, but then also externally. And so the difference between heartfulness meditation and a religion is a religion says God is outside of you, and we're the middleman between connecting you and God. It's after you die, and if you're with us, you're going to go to a good place like heaven. If you're not with us, you're going to go to hell. And so there's threats and bribes and coercion and all these things, and then you have to empower the organization. This is how religions work. They're a scam. Also talking about the religion of science as well here, because it's similarly a scam. We're the only ones, the arbiters of knowledge, scientific knowledge, and you have to bow down before us and do what we tell you because we know more than you. But in spirituality, God is inside of you and everywhere, and the system isn't there to, aggrandize the organization like in the heartfulness system. It's there to help you and help you to facilitate this connection between God that's inside of you, and it's done through meditation and experience. And so, there might be a chance one day heartfulness will become a religion and then it'll suck, right? It won't be as good as it is now because of the living aspect of it, which is important. because it's a living experiential system, which is much superior to book knowledge that can be manipulated and misinterpreted and gamed in some way to great benefit for the people that control it. You also can have the spiritual experience of things, right? In terms of, inside yourself, you can have the experience of doing things. Like you can be so sensitive and I guess intuitive, in some way empathic, and God can give you the experience and you can feel it, right? You can feel what it's like and you can empathize with other people because you can feel their experience, right? Internally, which is, separate from book knowledge. Because someone could say, oh, I have, cancer or something, and you go, all right, I'm going to go read about cancer, and you come back and you now understand about cancer. Or you can connect with them in some way, intuit and be, connected to them, and then you can have this internalized experience, like a dream can be an experience of something, and you have this experience and you feel like what they feel like. You understand what they're going through, the anxiety and the anger and the fear and things like this. And so, in this way, spiritual experience can be used as, something that's similar to physical experience. And that's where, if you become a spiritual person, then you can learn experientially, internally, without having external experiences, and that's just simply better, like I said, than book knowledge or mental knowledge and all the rest of it. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely reporting for the Apocalaughs and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.